Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon now as we deep dive into today's topic, which is all going to be around operating in the new field service economy. My name is Marianne, and I'm the Conference Director of our FSM Australia portfolio here at IQPC. I wanted to give a special thank you to our partner Zinier for supporting us on this webinar that you see today. So just as a little bit of context for what we're going to be talking about today, our team have been working really closely with Zinier over the past year. And what we recently did is we put together a report that you can actually download on your screens today. This report was all around how businesses have and can continue to really improve their field operations throughout this time. Whilst many of you here from just looking at everyone who is in attendance, I noticed that a lot of you are in essential services. But for those of you who are, I guess in a way, on face level at least, your businesses have been operating in a BAU standpoint. But despite that, we also recognize that there's been a lot of behind the scenes disruption that has also been affecting the field service industry. So because of that, what we did is we interviewed field service leaders across a range of different organizations. We put together this report, and we're very excited that a couple of them are here today to join us. What we're going to do is we're going to do a further deep dive on this report and the topics that were involved within it, and really talk about the ways that we can improve our field operations to drive these stronger customer experiences. So without further ado, because I know no one wants to listen to me talk for hours, I'm going to introduce our moderator. Alan Frye is the Vice President of Zinier across the Asia Pacific and Japan, and he's been leading the team for over the past year. Prior to that, he was Sales Director of GE Digital and has been Managing Director of Burst for 3 years as well. Alan's going to be moderating and leading the panel today, and is going to talk around the work field service leaders can do to improve their operations in a post-pandemic society. So over to you, Alan.
Great. Thanks, Marianne. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, as the case may be, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the second of our three-part series. And today is going to be particularly, I hope you find it as interesting as I think it is. We're going to talk to Todd and Alex, and I'll get them to introduce themselves in a minute. But what I love about our panelists today is they bring a very different perspective. Todd represents the backbone of the Australian economy, which is our small business sector. And Alex represents an ASX corporation with thousands of technicians. So really, it's a very good cross sample of how COVID's impacted us. So before we get started, I might just get Todd to introduce himself, and then I'll have Alex, and then I'll set the scene for the types of discussion that we're going to go through today. So, Todd, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, g'day. Thank you, Alan. G'day, everybody. I'm Todd Fiedler, the Managing Director of Fiedler Brothers Plumbing. We're a plumbing firm based in a country town called Kingaroy, about 2.5 hours drive from Brisbane. So, yeah, we've got about 7 tradesmen, 4 apprentices and 4 office girls. So we started off about 8 years ago with a team of 2 tradesmen, myself and another bloke, and then 2 apprentices. So we've seen, a lot of growth over the last 8 years. And I must say that, yeah, the last 6 months have been, probably the craziest of that time. So, yeah, that's just a little bit about us.
Thank you, Todd. Alex, intro, please.
Yes. Thanks, Anne. Hi, everyone. So I'm Group Manager for IT Innovation and Architecture for Coates Hire. So Coates Hire is the largest industrial equipment rental company in Australia. We have about 2,000 staff and 150 branches nationally. So yes, we have a national kind of coverage. I've been working for Coates Hire for 10 years, and recently, so we have been through a full digital transformation, focusing on our operational kind of processes, then products, and now it's full-fledged on customer and customer experience. Also, I'm running some innovation, and my PhD in artificial intelligence is helping us look at new ways of doing things.
So what do you do in your spare time there, Alex? Thanks.
Trying to think about work.
Yeah, that's right. So thanks, Todd. Thanks, Alex. So let me set the scene. Let me cast your mind back to a world that perhaps many of us have forgotten about. It's March. It's beautiful autumn here in Australia. We're going out for dinner at restaurants. We're at bars. We're at pubs. We're at barbecues. We've got friends around, and life feels pretty good. And then, not out of the blue, we could see the signs coming from what was happening around the world. But then there's an announcement. We're going into lockdown. You know, I'm going to start with Todd, because the impact of a lockdown on small business is immediate. So perhaps, Todd, could you share your initial feelings about what happened when lockdown was announced for you?
Yeah, well, for us, I suppose it was that initial shock and that initial fear. You know, being a small business operator, it's always a bit of a tough slog, I must say. And I suppose for us, the thought of downing tools and not working at all, was quite a big worry. You know, the thought of not being able to get the revenue coming in. I mean, we got numbers we've got to try and hit to make sure that we keep everything on the road. So that initial worry took its toll on myself, no doubt. But I mean, when you're talking about 15 families that you employ, it's sort of it hit everybody, and there was a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear within the community, even though it was only even though we're only a small community, it was quite a fearful time. So I suppose it took us a few days, to get over that shock, and with the government, I suppose, coming in with some of the measures that they were talking about, it all sort of happened fairly quickly. But then, once we learned that we were an essential service, being plumbing and health and safety and that sort of stuff, so that eased the concern initially. But then I suppose you sort of go into the thoughts, well, if one of us were to get COVID, well, then it's a whole different picture. So certainly some stressful times going, back at March there.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. Alex, obviously in the corporate world, it's a very different beast. So how was the view from your perspective?
I would say it was quite similar, but when you're a large company, you put measures to be a bit more resilient, especially after we had the mining burst. We looked at ways to make sure that we still can generate revenue when you have adverse conditions. So here the main problem was whether we were going to still be running or not, and how our customers would be running as well on their side. So what we found out is that we were considered as essential services as well. So meaning that we could still operate and serve our customers, and our customers themselves were still operating. So some slowed down, some stopped. Because we also address kind of B2C to B2B, what we discovered from the COVID period is that a lot of people have engaged trades or did some renovation themselves, so they were still hiring from us. So from an operational perspective, thanks to a quite robust health and safety kind of culture in the company, we managed to pass some kind of measures to branches to make sure that we could operate in a safe way and could have equipment that was safe and from a COVID perspective on top of the rest of safety that can be passed to customers. And we started cleansing our equipment pre-hire and post-hire, and then put all the social distancing in branches. Where I was a bit more involved was with corporate sites, so the back office type of sites, and working in IT. because people were confined at the beginning, they had to work from home, still supporting our branches. And that happened quite, I would say, nicely, thanks to the technology that we had put beforehand. The thing where we had to push a bit more was with our finance accounting people and making sure that they could work outside of the office and from home. So giving them laptops. So that's where most of the energy was spent.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like not business as usual, but it sounds like you were quite prepared for that type of shock, generally speaking, which is good. So we've taken a snapshot of the initial, if you like, reaction to this change. What I'd like to now do is ask your feedback on a couple of areas. One is the impact on your people and your teams, because I think in this whole COVID pandemic it has got some attention, but I think it's really the critical part. Then I want to explore what technology changes you may have made, and then thirdly, talk a little bit about what the customer experience was like, because at the end of the day, that's really the critical part. So perhaps we'll go back to Todd. Todd, do you want to just talk about how you managed your team and how you managed to keep them on track and focused, and what you actually did to make that all happen?
Yep. Well, to be honest with you, when it was sort of all coming, when it all come about, once we got over the initial shock, I mean, we're in a country town, and I honestly was one of these ones that were like, oh, it's all blown up a bit here. It's, they're talking it all up. It's not as bad as it really should be. And so I honestly had my head in the sand for a little bit. And but it wasn't until I started talking to my office girls, like one of them in the office is a bit over 50, but she would go and see her elderly mother-in-law, and then you start to think, well, you hear the stories that young people might not even know they've got it, transmit it, and it can go further on down the line. So I suppose once I actually stopped and listened to the team a little bit more from a personal level, it sort of really exposed, how far down the line it could go. And I suppose once I'd sort of figured that out, I really did say, now's the time we've got to change things. So with the office girls, we ended up getting them to work from home. 3 of them went home, and then one of them stayed in the office just to man the office. And the young lady that stayed, she'd just finished a traineeship, so she was happy to stay. But we made sure we put all the measures around, the boys not getting contact with the clients. It had to be by appointment or wait at the front door, and sort of keeping all that social distancing. So it was pretty big right at the start with the team actually understanding, their beliefs around it, and you got to respect that too. That was a learning for me as well. So.
Good. Excellent. Thanks, Todd. Alex, you're obviously will have a different perspective. How did you manage the process in relation to people specifically with the new operating environment?
So working from home happened somewhat kind of seamlessly. So we were already operating. I will talk about IT in particular. Working using MS Teams. And we had the rest of the business on Skype for Business. And in IT, we were using Teams quite well, but in the business, not brought too much into that way of communicating. It was primarily emails. So when we had our guys working from home, pretty much no change happened there. And they quite liked not having to commute, especially talking about Zinier. We've got a few guys doing like 90-minute commutes on public transport. So they were quite happy to do that. But what we noticed in the kind of long run was that that boundary between family time and work time kind of blurred a bit too much. And we had guys working like, I would say, indecent hours. So you really have to come back to them and say, no, you have to spend time with your family, take a break for lunchtime, walk outside if you can, because you're going to have some mental health issues, and you're going to burn out. So that's kind of the measures we try to do, but things happened also because we had to control costs. So we were asked to work 4 days a week, so take on our leave so that we could keep as many people as possible and not try to have to go through a restructure. We had to go through one anyway because we started a new strategy. So the executives wanted to reshape the organization so that we could restart the new strategy in a proper way. So there were a number of kind of items that happens within the organizations to try to control costs and making sure that people were still in the right mindset to work. So it was kind of, for leaders, the main focus was to be sure that people were still operating, they were safe mentally, and that we could carry on as in a sustained way, because we were not seeing that moving away for a long time.
Great. And just out of curiosity, how did you know that the team was working insane hours?
I start quite early, and when you see some of our guys starting earlier than that, they may say, oh, we've got a newborn, and yes, we're already awake and things like that, but you still meet them or have communication at, let's say, they start at 6 and they still finish at 7 or 8. Saying, yeah, perhaps not a bit too much, guys. Spend your time with your family.
Fantastic. All right, so that's sort of the human element. Let's switch gears a little bit and let's explore the technology element. So, and again, we'll swap back to you, Todd. From a technology perspective, what did you introduce to deal with the COVID WorkSafe environment?
Once we made the decision that the office girls were going home, we sent their actual work computers home with them, just for security reasons and all that sort of stuff. So, there was that from a security point of view, but then also usually the phone would ring the main office and, the receptionist would answer it and just divvy it off to whichever girl in the office at the time, the question or the payment might have been related to. So I suppose we had to sort of then think about that. Well, if there was one person sitting in the office, but they needed, the client needed to talk to, one of the other girls, rather than sort of giving them their personal mobile or something to try and ring, we thought we had to do things a bit better, for our clients. So we were able to get a phone system set up that then, we could divert that client through to whichever girl in the office, whether it was accounts payable or accounts receivable or the office manager, however that might have looked, so that the communication was kept well and kept working pretty much seamlessly. So, that was a good thing that we had to implement. But then even with the team of the boys, like usually they were, being a small country town, our work shed is where our stock is. So they sort of come and go during the day, and they'd always have that interaction with the job scheduling lady. So with her not being in the office, it added then, the added sort of the grief of, talking freely with her. So we end up getting a little an app on the phone, Voxer it's called. It's like a little walkie-talkie, and you can set up different groups. So the boys were able to keep that continual communication up with Leanne, our office lady, and also my brother Stephen, who is like the operations manager. So that it actually worked really well. Like it was almost something that come out of such a bad time was something that's really, something that we'll continue to use from now on. It was really good. So that was probably the biggest things that sort of came from the technology point of view for us.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I know you were talking beforehand, you've now become an expert on Zoom like the rest of the population, which is
very, very true. Very true. And to be honest with you, the Zoom worked well. Like you were probably getting to more meetings because you could work it around home and the kids and everything else. But yes, no, I'm certainly become a bit more technically advanced, I must say, through COVID, which is good for me. So
yeah, good. Alex, from a technology perspective, do you have to introduce any new technology or you make some changes? What happened from your end?
Not too much, to be honest. And branches operated the same. So what we did, because teams worked very well for IT, we had in our plans, but not quite soon, to migrate that to a business and remove them from Skype for Business. So we accelerated that, and that worked very well. And now they are eager users of the technology. And that also helped primarily, I would say, our sales reps, because they couldn't travel anymore. So they had to use that technology to communicate with their customers, like a fair bit of sales reps around the world, I would think. The other bit of technology, but that's kind of, I would say, would have happened in different places. We tried to have our guys coming back to offices once they were out of confinement in Sydney and other states. And we tried to have our corporate offices COVID safe. So we had to put some kind of measures or safety measures to make that happen. So it's having a facial kind of temperature sensor to make sure that you have that. And they built something very quickly using SurveyMonkey to make sure that you put some kind of disclaimers and you say, yes, I'm not sick and I'm okay to go. I would say in this type of conditions, a SurveyMonkey or a low-code platform is very welcome. So like if you use like Power App from Microsoft or OutSystems, or that's something where you can spin up something very quickly for whatever purpose.
Yeah, that's great. It's very interesting. So sudden change, you have to introduce a new workflow, and then you have to model that new workflow inside some technology to provide an audit trail and a series of steps that people need to follow in a consistent manner across the business. So that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, thank you for that. So now let's talk about really what I think is potentially, one of the keys here. How has your customers' experience changed as a result of dealing with you during COVID-19? I think this is one of the more interesting areas. Todd, do you want to share your experience, because you're right at the cold face? So I'm very keen to hear what you found.
Yeah, mate. So for us, being in such a local, sort of like a smaller community, you tend to know, 50 to 90% of your clients. And I suppose with COVID, it really did, shine that light on, really, we're a service-based industry. Without our clients, we are nothing. So I suppose it's sort of, we step back in time a little bit, well, we're here to serve our clients, and now with the whole, their safety at our forefront, of our minds as well as ours, it really made us realise that we had to take that whole experience to another level. And naturally, with the health and safety side of it, we were making sure we're phoning them to ask them all the COVID questions beforehand, and then also explaining to them how the measures we'd put in place to make sure that we were doing all the right things, and how important it was for us to make sure our team were on board with that. And even for some of them, explain to them that if one of us went under, none of us would have to sort of self-isolate, which is not good for anybody. So the initial upfront sort of part of it was really, I suppose, explaining to them that we're here to help, but we're doing it right. We're not cutting any corners, and we're all healthy and safe. But I suppose what we found then, once we're on site, is for some of these people that hadn't seen family for donkey's years, or hadn't been on the holiday that they were supposed to have been planning, they actually quite enjoyed just being able to talk to people. So a lot of our tradies and apprentices were probably on the job a little bit longer, but they were taking the time to sort of just to listen, even at times, to some of the clients and to what they'd been through or how they were feeling. So that was quite a good take out of it. And as a group, we spoke about that afterwards and shared a few stories. So yeah, that was probably a pleasing part of it. And then obviously moving forward, I suppose it's reset the clock, because you know what it's like in business. You get busy and you get sort of tied to making sure you're hitting your targets to survive, and you're doing this and you're doing that. And sometimes you can tend to veer away from the whole client and really what you're there for. So it sort of reset us a little bit too. And I mean, I must say for going on 8 years of building a business from scratch, you do get to a point at times there where one bad client might taint them, you know what I mean? So it was a good refresher for us, but that was sort of where we went with the whole client experience.
So thanks for sharing. That sounds like you really personalized it at a time when people actually really needed that interaction. So that's
yeah.
That's I
that's the best way I've done it.
Do you run a monopoly there, Todd? Can I call it a monopoly?
Well, to be honest with you, there's another plumbing firm that are quite, they'd be similar size to us, and that's where both my brother and I did our apprenticeship. So you can imagine how that's gone. But we get on with them really well. But no, we're locals. A lot of people know us, so you could say that. Well, it feels like we've got a fair bit of it, mate. So yeah.
Good, excellent, thanks. I'll come back to the learnings as we sort of wrap up. But that sounds to me like a key learning to remember that it really is all about the customer. So that's good. Alex, how did the customer experience change for you, given your diverse customer base?
Yes, differently depending on the base. I would say our smaller customers, more B2C, so as stated earlier, was a good time for renovations. So what we've seen actually is a fair on-take of our new e-commerce platform. And we've seen growth in that space. As part of the other experience, then you had to consider the branch experience. So either increase requests for transport and delivery to their place, or if they were coming to our branches, then to make sure that they comply with the regulations in the different states. So that was as part, I suppose, of the general kind of, for us, BAU, working with HACQ. For larger customers, it really depends on the industry. So the mining customers, no change, BAU, just operate it. The more kind of construction companies, I would say the experience, because here you try really to make sure that if they have projects in our pipeline, or they are there, that we can serve them. It really depends on the regulations they put themselves onto their sites, and then abiding to that. So there's a fair bit of kind of compliance in that regard to make sure that we've got safe equipment and people are inducted. I don't think there've been too much changes. There might be kind of changes in the way we hand over equipment and the cleansing of equipment. But apart from that, I suppose that would be primarily the experience would have been from sales reps not being able to have a face-to-face chat with the customers. Would be more kind of like we're doing right now, which is okay, but it's a bit different.
Yeah, being on the sales side myself, I could tell you it's very different. The dinners are out, drinks are out. Actually,
exactly.
Just sitting,
yeah.
This is all gone. It's a very different experience. So one of the things you mentioned was your e-commerce platform and the higher adoption as a result of COVID-19. What did you build your e-commerce platform prior to this, or did you have to add more functionality? How did you use it? What channels were on the e-commerce platform? What did you find adoption-wise? I'm keen to hear about that whole experience.
Yeah, so people may think, well, we're just introducing e-commerce. In what century are they? I would say yes, but so rental is a bit different to to retail, and industrial equipment rental is different to renting a room in a hotel or a car. The thing happens is that it's hard to manage our inventory because our customers don't even know themselves when they're going to return the gear. So the main problem is two things. It's equipment availability and how you manage that through your commerce channel. And second is complex pricing structure. But we did change our operating model about 3 years ago to allow for that. And once we had the kind of right structure to be able to receive that type of transaction from another channel, we introduced the channel. And we introduced that prior to COVID, but it was just really beginning. What we've seen is that even with a reduced catalog, people were keen to transact from it. And actually the sales ramped up and we put more and more effort into that.
Right. So I'm just curious, that as a channel, what did that become as a percentage of your total transactions?
Oh, it's still tiny, very, very, very tiny. Because it was that platform has been primarily, so when it was introduced, was primarily targeted at our B2C customers. And they are not the main segments that generates the most revenue or transact the most. So we still had a fair bit of stuff happening on other channels. So here we're just introducing a bit of innovation, checking how it goes, checking that we can process this transaction. And then what we're currently doing is putting the whole digital ecosystem for our customers. So with IoT, with customer portal, APIs, and so on.
Okay, great. Very good. Now, I know everyone wants to understand about IoT because it's definitely on the hype cycle. So I know I'm fascinated to hear about it. Would you mind sharing what your experience with IoT has been like within your business?
I suppose you're asking me?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, Alex.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. All right. So IoT. So for people who don't know, that is leveraging a new type of data, and it's data coming from your machines. Potentially, it's anything that you can track. It can even be people. It can be animals that you want to track. And they're sending data related to them. So the most traditional way of receiving that data is wirelessly. It can be through the standard kind of communication like 4G. Could come from satellites if you don't have good comms. And in Australia, you have to consider that. And the type of data you will receive is very traditionally would be location, so GPS coordinates, but could be something related to what you're tracking. So for a piece of equipment would be related to its utilization, so when it's on or off, or related to its fuel consumption. You can have remote control if you want to, or you can have like for very advanced machinery, like planes or like Caterpillar, big trucks we're talking about here is they're putting sensors pretty much everywhere. And here it's a rich type of data you get. And you can do potentially, if you're up to it, some preemptive type of maintenance. So for us, we have somewhat a problem being a rental company is that we have 20,000 make model. So we have to deal with a lot of manufacturers who may have fitted or not devices on their own product, and they can be very different product themselves. So we have to deal from like road barriers where you may just need to track the location, to a Caterpillar truck, to a generator, to a portaloo, to a water treatment system. So very, very diverse things. So what we decided to do, so first so there are very obvious kind of use cases of using that data internally. So just even for the sake of doing preventative maintenance. Being a rental company, you give your gear to a customer and they're supposed to use it, but you don't necessarily know how much they're using it. So how do you schedule your maintenance? Very difficult question to ask. So normally you would do that if you don't have telemetry data. It's when the customer returns your equipment or you send someone there to check it. With telemetry data, you get that data. So that's the obvious one. What we actually targeted our IoT kind of platform was for our customers. So they've been asking more and more and asking that as a requirement for our tenders. So the thing that we did was, great, okay, so Mr. Customers, you want IoT, so let's check what you want out of it. And we did a proof of concept about 2 years ago in WA. And then we tested that. And what we tested with them was a kind of data as a service type of model, where we partnered with a company that will handle all the devices. So installing the devices, managing the comms of the data, and then managing the data, and then presenting the data to our customers. And we saw that the main problem, so two things was, first is how you consolidate data from all these different kind of providers, and how you retrofit devices. And what we've seen is retrofitting devices is the most expensive part of the exercise. Not in terms of the device itself, but tracking, when finding the equipment, you need to have that, have a downtime to do it, and have a technician installing it. But on top of that, what you need to be aware is that a device in itself doesn't really work. You need to connect to your sensors, and you need to have a harness. So you may have a similar type of device, which is just collecting your data and then transmitting it to base, but you need the harness to connect to the sensors. And you need pretty much one harness per make model. And that is a bit of R&D that can be very costly when you have 20,000 make models. So here, that's the thing that we're trying to go through. And what we ended up was customers want the data, but they don't necessarily use it. So they say it's a requirement, but they don't necessarily know how to use it. What we discovered is that we don't necessarily need the tool or the data itself, is the outcome. So what we're working on is how we provide that outcome. And since we've built our own internal platform to collect all that data from multiple type of devices, and we fully integrated that with our customer portal, so that they have their higher information and the equipment usage based on that, so that they can make the right decision on what to do with the fleet they have on site.
Right. Oh, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Just out of curiosity, obviously there's lots of different equipment types you described. Your IoT sensors, obviously for things like the Caterpillar, there's built-in information, but the traditional Portaloo, perhaps not so much. Did you have to do some customized IoT sensor, and does it measure water flow and tank fillage? And I'm just curious.
Yeah, it just put a floater as a sensor, put a device on top of it, and then put the workflow to trigger alerts, and then send someone to deal with the problem.
Great. So that's very good. Okay, thank you for sharing. I found that particularly interesting. So Todd, to sort of and it plays nicely to what Zinier actually does. So I was quite curious. Todd, we fast forwarded from March, we're now sitting here in September, although it feels like December. We're here in September. Has there been any positives? When we look back, we can see plenty of negatives, but I think there's actually been some positives out of this as well. From your perspective, what positives have you identified as a result of the changes that have been forced upon us all this year?
Yeah, there is, when you stop and think, there's quite a lot of positives, like I sort of touched on before. Obviously, one of them was, how important our clients are to us, and really taken that customer experience to the next level. So even internally from COVID, we've started to think about other things that aren't necessarily COVID related, but will enhance that whole customer experience. So instead of going off what we've done in the past, you've always got to better yourself, I suppose. So the whole client, the client journey is going to be a big thing for us. But I suppose also then, valuing team and being together through the good times and the bad times. So, I think it sort of shone a light on our team as well, how good they were. And, just that we do have to look out for each other. You just don't know what's around the corner. Like, I mean, who would have thought in January, February that we would have been facing what we faced? So, and I suppose that for me was, making sure that we all stuck together and no one didn't go without a job. Like, I mean, I know they could go down and get the benefits, but we've got a team of people that they want to be working with us. So, there was that, and then even just the refining of that technology. There's so much technology out there, and I mean, I even get interested in all that data that Alex can harness, and you got to be always thinking of doing things smarter and better. So, with the likes of Voxer and even the thought of potentially not actually having to visit sites to quote work and stuff like that. So there's just a whole range of little avenues that we can go down to make the whole workings of the business, sort of a whole lot better. So that were some good positives that, I believe come out of COVID. So
that's great. They're pretty major ones too. I mean, it's quite interesting. I'm sure everyone on the call has experienced the same thing, but I think I noticed personally, you had to check in with the team a little bit more regularly, and you had to check in on their mental health. And I would do a typical Australian thing, say, "G'day, how you going?" And I think what I noticed was certain people handled it a lot better than others. Did you notice that in your team, Todd? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, mate, definitely, without a doubt. Like, I mean, we got a pretty young range of guys. Like, we've got 4 apprentices that are, sort of under the age of 22. A couple of guys that have just finished their trade that are, in their mid-20s. And you got some of us older fellas. And then the office girls, there's a couple of older ones in the office. So it did affect everybody differently. The younger generation didn't seem... I don't think the health and safety side of stuff worried them. The paycheck did, So it was interesting to see that. Whereas, some of the older team members, obviously with older parents and all that sort of stuff, you could see how it could affect them. So,
yeah, good. Thanks, Todd. Alex, from your perspective, any positives out of COVID-19?
Yeah, there was pretty much kind of a stretch test for technology, and it's was sustainable, so good. Yeah, IT. But yeah, overall, I think it was at the end a much closer team, because we had to catch up with everyone to check that they were okay, and not just with IT but with everyone. So you just communicate with, trying to break silos and work as a team, and making sure that everyone's okay. And especially when we have our colleagues working in Melbourne, just checking even more. And I believe you're working from Melbourne, Alan? Is that correct?
To rub it in. Yes.
Yeah, so we feel the pain for you guys. So so it kind of... I think it brought us all closer. So even if you're a national company and you have people working in Perth and Melbourne, yes, we are together, and we try to help each other. And the other thing was, I would say something that we knew, but we need to work a bit better on, is our operations have always been immensely responsive to anything. So when we had the bushfires, we helped the community a fair bit in that sense at the last minute. So for that, we're pretty good. But to provide a kind of more consistent customer experience, that's where we need to improve. And I think with COVID, it brought that a bit more forward as well, because we needed to provide that extra kind of level of experience or engagement with them. So that's where we're going to focus even more now.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I'll actually take a little bit of part out of the fact that there were some positives out of what is clearly not an ideal situation. So I think that's quite a good note to sort of finish our portion of this particular section. I'd just say that some of you may be wondering why Zinier is sponsoring this discussion, and obviously Zinier is a field service management platform that's designed to enable touchless field service. And some of the concepts that we've heard today, things like standardized workflows to deliver a consistent customer experience, intelligent scheduling and dispatch of field operations, these are all core tenets of Zinier. And then embedded in our platform is the ability to very quickly and at a user level make changes to workflows to ensure consistent delivery and consistent occupational health and safety processes are followed across the board, and all while being fully auditable. So there is a lot of similarities between what we do and the business requirements that both Todd and Alex expressed. So gentlemen, thank you very much for that. It's very, very interesting. And what I found particularly interesting is whether you're the backbone of the business of Australia as a small business or at the corporate end, there is a huge degree of similarity. Perhaps a little bit difference in complexity, but a lot of similarity, which is great. So what I'd like to do now is we've got 14 minutes left, and I'd like to throw open the floor and see if anyone has any questions for Todd and Alex. I think I can see it on the team chat. So if you just want to put in something on the team chat, and then we can have Todd or Alex answer the question. Anyone? Okay. Sometimes, okay. You can absolutely email myself or Marianne, and we can follow up those questions later. But at this point in time, then, if no one has any questions, I'd like to thank Todd and Alex very much for sharing your insights and experiences. I found it very interesting. It's always fascinating to see how organisations deal with change, never alone, monumental change. So it's very interesting. So thank you very much, guys. Marianne, thank you for organising this session. Very much appreciated. If no one has any further questions, thank you all for joining, and hopefully we'll see you at the third schedule, which is the third event coming up next month. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Alan, for that, and thank you, Alex and Todd, as well, for joining us today. We do actually have one question that just came through right now. I think they're just slowly filtering in. So maybe before we kind of close it, I might actually just ask you guys this. So Faizan Ali from Crown Solicitor's Office is asking, how did you guys deal with assets stock take during COVID?
So from our point of view, it was pretty much BAU.
Okay, perfect. All right, awesome.
From our side of things, we've got a storm, and so we sort of rolled through it pretty well. We were quite lucky. We don't have massive amounts of stock, so we were quite lucky from our end. But I could imagine it would have been an absolute nightmare if there was a crucial stock take to be taken during that time, especially with social distancing and all that sort of stuff. Somebody would have been working some long hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, thanks for that. And yeah, and so if anyone else has any questions, feel free to email either myself or Alan direct, and we can always do introductions and answer your questions then. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, I just want to thank Alan and Alex and Todd for joining us here today. It was a really great discussion, and it is really great to really listen to how different organisations and teams operate their field service, especially throughout these times. So I want to say a special thank you. Also, a special thank you to our partner Zinier today. For those of you who don't know, we had a virtual networking night a couple of weeks ago to really promote this report and this topic, and it was just a little bit of fun. And if you couldn't join us for that night, or even if you did, that's okay, because we've also got another one coming up in the evening of our main FSM event, which will be on the 15th of October. So I hope you can join us then, and with the team at Zinier as well. Hopefully you can watch Alan make some cocktails himself this time. But I hope I can see you all then, and I hope you all have a lovely afternoon. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Marianne.